Okay, so welcome to this forthright interview with JJ Johnson, who's the first person to get back to me on things that I've been hearing about Camp Hope in the background for over a year now. And JJ, welcome. I'm happy to give you a platform to tell your story.
Oh, thank you, Sulani. You know, when I ran for city council out in the valley here a couple years ago, at one of the first meetings, I think it was the Republicans for Spokane County, the first thing I said when I stood up in front was, "I'm not a politician." And everybody told me, "Don't say that." I went to one of the Democratic groups, and the first thing I said was, "I'm not a politician." And they said, "Don't say that." And what they told me over the next couple of weeks is, JJ, if you'll say that you're a Republican, I can get you all this money and I can get you all this information and it'll help you win the election. Democrats told me the same thing. If you just say you're a Democrat, I'll be able to get you this, this, and this. Problem is, I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm an American. And it's interesting at this time that almost 50% of the American voting public is like me. They don't want to say they're a Republican. They don't want to say they're a Democrat. And there's a reason for that. And that reason is why I'm talking to you today. I'm the kind of guy that I was taught not to stab somebody in the back. That if you were going to discuss anything about them, you do it to their face. So I went and met with Lisa Brown last week because I knew that we would be talking, and my conversations with Sheriff Ozzie and what happened needed to come out, and I wanted her to know. Lisa Brown and Sheriff Ozzie have a lot of history, and neither one of them will say it's good in any way. Now, I don't agree with everything that Ozzie says or how he says it. I've told him that. Like I said, that's how I do things. I tell people right to their face. He knows how I stand. I don't agree with everything that he says or feels or how he says it. I don't agree with just about anybody in 100%. And I'm very open about that. But that doesn't mean that we can't have conversations, that we can't find common ground. And when an individual is in a position of leadership, that's their job, to find common ground, to get something done. Lisa Brown even admitted that our country has a crisis with a lack of leadership. And it's interesting that it came from her, because I don't think she has what it takes to be a true leader. And I'll tell you why. Shortly after I lost the election by 68 votes, so maybe I should have listened to the Republicans or the Democrats.
That is a lesson to everyone that every vote does count. It pays to turn out.
That's right. Please vote, because that's the moral of the whole story. It is us. It is the American voters that have allowed us to get to where we're at. It's time for a change. But anyway, Ozzie reached out shortly after that election was finalized, and it took like 2 months to finalize it. Full recount. Didn't change one single vote, by the way, for all those people who think that that's not accurate. Didn't change one single vote. He gave me a call and said, JJ, we've got some things coming up, and I would appreciate some help in messaging. I said, sure, I'd love to help. So we got together and started talking, and one of the biggest concerns he had going was Camp Hope and what to do about it. And at first, our conversations, it was more about him telling me how he felt and me telling him about how I felt. And so what he was doing was continuing in the same path. And everybody remembers the videos where he came out and said he was going to storm the camp and close the camp, and came up with, I think the first deadline was November 1st, or maybe it was even in October of 2022. And it kept sliding back for multiple reasons. But along in about October, shortly after Jules Helping Hands was awarded the contract to basically take roll and assign identifications to people and try and get some information on what people in Camp Hope needed, I reached out to Ozzy and said, the contract that Jules Helping Hands has does not encourage anyone to leave Camp Hope. It just encourages them to stay there. And we've got winter coming. People out in the elements, living in a tent when it's minus 20, struggle. I was sincerely afraid that there would be deaths. And that by the time they closed the camp down, they would be digging up bodies. That didn't happen, even though I've been told by individuals who were involved in the whole process that people died. They might not have died at the camp, but they died because of a lack of a true place to live. But anyway, I said the contract that Jules Helping Hands has does not incentivize anyone. What about if we devise a plan where there is additional money when people leave, when people go to a facility, a bonus system? We brought in 2 individuals who were already contracted in one way or another to address the problem. One of those individuals, and I'm not going to throw these people under the bus by naming them specifically. You've already mentioned that individuals have been threatened, right? So I'm not going to give any specifics. I will if I absolutely have to, but at this point, these people did what they should have done. And that was try and make it better. So anyway, I had 2 individuals that were already involved with what was going on by contract or by being a volunteer helping out. We devised a plan to take to the agency that was contracted by the state to make the offer to the state. That agency was 100% on board with our plan. They thought this is going to make a big difference.
Do you mean the agency that Department of Commerce had contracted with to run the funds through?
I won't get any more specific than I already have.
Okay, well, I know who that is, but yeah.
I think most people do. But this individual did what he thought was right. They met with, from the notes that I got from the meeting, I wasn't there, but I got notes from people who were there immediately after, and they met with Lisa Brown, other agencies from DOT. There was evidently even somebody from the governor's office on the phone. And in that meeting, they offered to, the county and the city offered to drop any and all lawsuits, to not pull any law enforcement into the camp, to let the camp run its course, provided they moved to this different contract arrangement. It was shot down.
Can you send me those meeting notes?
Not at this time. I can't, it's too specific.
Okay.
Again, I have them, and if it really becomes critical, I could pull them out, but that's really not the issue. I'm not trying to put anybody in jail. I'm not trying to get anybody thrown out of anything. I'm just trying to say that individuals who are put in that position that make a determination based on politics, not in what was best for the community, perhaps shouldn't be in a position of leadership for that community. And when I mentioned all this to Lisa Brown, she told me she didn't remember it, that she wasn't there, that I didn't understand how government works. There's been several individuals, politicians specifically, who have told me over the years that I don't understand how government works. I work for one of the biggest government agencies in Eastern Washington. Actually, I believe it is the biggest government agency in Eastern Washington with a $500 million budget. I know how government works. I also know how government doesn't work. When people say, well, that would have been this department to make that decision, or it would have been the lawyers that make that decision, I say, well, somebody should have gotten on the phone and had a conversation and worked out an arrangement, because they are of leadership quality. That didn't happen. A month later, I decided maybe I should try a different tactic. So I reached out to an individual in Spokane who was a leader in the Democratic Party. Again, I won't mention the person's name, but we had several conversations. And what he said is, well, what seems to be holding everything up is the lawsuits. How about if we get a mediator who brings the two together and they all agree in writing, in a legal fashion, to drop the lawsuits so that we can start working together? Beautiful.
Okay.
Again, it was shot down. It was shot down only because the state didn't want to work with the city and the county. Politics. That's not leadership. Now, I also have to say that during this whole process, I was very much involved with the work the city and the county was doing to develop the track shelter. There were a lot of people who worked real hard to get that going. I don't agree with many of the decisions that were made. Obviously, it's a financial boondoggle. It was a facility that should not have been chosen because it doesn't have infrastructure that was needed, and the cost of that infrastructure is ridiculous. The monthly cost for that would frighten people if they knew what it was. But they were trying to do something. They were trying to get beds available for people to leave Camp Hope before winter so that we didn't have the worst happen. During that process, one of the biggest struggles was getting anyone from the city to attend. It was supposed to be a city-county coalition. The city's paying for it. And yet, leadership didn't send anyone to the meetings. Is that leadership? Not in my opinion. The city of Spokane and Spokane County has some problems. We have gangs that are mostly made up of white kids that have grown up in Spokane. We've got the highest rate of domestic violence in the state. Our kindergarten students come to school least prepared than almost anywhere in the nation. And yet we complain about what the school system can do with it. More kids with trauma than almost anywhere in the nation. We have more immigrants. Spokane Public Schools deals with 80 different languages. 80.
Yeah.
We
I
have
know, I'm not sure it's still the same, but at one time, at least, the most common second language first language of English as a second language learners was Russian, from the Ukrainian and Russian immigrants that we've
It was
taken.
Ukrainian, and then Afghanistan. We had a tremendous amount of Afghanistan refugees. And, you know, the Malaysian people is huge. You'd be just amazed at how many different languages that we have to deal with. Our ELD, ELL department is doubling in 2 years. That's the department that tries to help people who can't speak English and get them caught up. We have several issues that we need to be addressing, and we need leadership. Our city council, they have done more over the past month for dogs and cats than they've done for homelessness people over the past year. Does that make sense? It does if you're running, I guess, and then it becomes important. Winter is coming again, and it sounds like we're going to have a light winter. But out of Camp Hope, the state spent $24 million to get 200 people in temporary housing. I mean, yes, they came up with this database. They have a list of all these people. Whether their names are accurate, I don't know. A lot of people question that. But really, for that $24 million, what did they gain? Most of those people are still homeless. They're just spread out all over, hiding in cracks and corners. What's going to happen when the weather gets bad? Now, Lisa Brown the other night in the debate said that Camp Hope never should have happened, although it happened under her watch. And it won't happen if she's mayor. But she has no plan. Ask her what her plan is. There's no specifics. There's no step 1, step 2, step 3. So how can she say it's not going to happen again when those people are still out there? They're still suffering from addiction. What ends up happening is I'm the acting chair for Citizens for a Safe Spokane. We're a non-political entity that doesn't allow rhetoric or labels in our conversations. I have been in touch with just about every city council member, every county commissioner, and discussed trying to accelerate people in medical school into the mental health industry. I've gone to WSU and had the conversations. They're excited about it. All they need is somebody to call them. Some of those city council members I talked to last spring about this. No one has done anything. Our biggest problem is mental health. Spokane Public Schools hired 55 professionals and put them in every single school that has students. Fantastic. The problem is they took mental health professionals from the entire state, Pacific Northwest, California. I mean, they drained the industry. There's nobody left. What do we do about that? We get together with the schools and we accelerate getting people into the profession. They sign a contract that they're going to hang around for 10 years or whatever, 5 years, and pay off their student loan. Boom. But nobody does anything. What do we do, Sulani? What do we do? And
Well,
how did we get?
You're expressing a frustration that a lot of people have. I have a huge frustrations with how we handle mental health care in this country. I've written about it a couple of times in columns.
We don't.
We don't. I recently had a situation with someone who knew he was in crisis, asked to go into the clinic to see if they could see him early. He's in the clinic and they said, "Oh no, you'll be, just wait, your regular, you have an appointment in 2 weeks, just wait for that appointment." It's like, to me, that's like you telling a diabetic, "Yeah, just suck on this hard candy, see if you feel better. See if you make it for 2 weeks."
Exactly.
You do that and you're leaving someone with their best option is street drugs to self-medicate. And we should not be surprised that that's what somebody does. It's a logical choice for them.
It's absolutely a logical choice. Yeah. And we have individuals living out on the street who have their addiction problems. They make a determination, I want to get out of this. They go to one of the resources, and the first thing the resource says is, well, you have to go through detox. Good luck finding a detox bed. If you happen to find a detox bed, and for some of these people that are severely addicted to alcohol, they have to have a medical detox bed. There has to be IV, or they may die.
Yeah,
If
you
they don't
can't
die,
just, if a serious alcoholic can't just stop, that's not going to work.
That's right. So an individual is lucky enough to find a detox bed. They go through the detox program, and the detox center says, you're done. See ya. Well, where do I go now? Well, you can call all these places and see if they have a bed available. It's not that that started when they first got into the detox, where there was some coordination to see if there would be a bed available when they got out. That doesn't happen. So these people go all the way through the detox. They call around, can't find a bed. What do? Where do they go? Right back to where they were. And a week later, they're in the exact same spot they were before the detox. It's insane. That is not a program. And how anybody could think it is just blows me away. But there are people who will tell you they have a system that works, when obviously it doesn't.
So what, as part of the Safer Spokane group, what are some things that, yeah, Citizens for a Safe Spokane. Tell me the name again. I've got it wrong.
Citizens for a Safe Spokane.
Citizens for a Safe Spokane. What has your group talked about in terms of things you'd like to see happen?
Well, first of all, we realize that mental health is a problem. And so that's why we tried and are going to continue to try to address that. We realized that some of those mentorship programs that I had when I was a kid, and it used to be that you could go down to the local school during the summer, and there was this group there from the county doing all these activities. I learned how to play chess when I was 10 years old at a rec facility at McDonald Elementary out here in the valley. The softball, kickball, they gave kids ways to come together, to learn team building, to find out their strengths, their social, emotional place. We don't have that anymore. It's been cut because of budgets. There's a lot of young families in our area that have to work 2 jobs in order to pay the rent. They have to. It's not a choice. How do they get childcare? They can't afford childcare anymore. A lot of people have left the workforce because when by the time they figure their childcare, they're making $1 an hour. And they've given up what they could have had with their children. So they said, the heck with that. So now we have fewer people in the workforce, and these people have less finances. It's a lose-lose proposition. So we understand that we need to try and get back mentorships. We need to get back youth athletic clubs and organizations that will give youth that sense of belonging, because that's really what's driving people to gangs, to drugs, is a lack of belonging. They spend half their time trying to be someone they're not on social media. There isn't any way for them to learn who they really are. And when they suddenly find out that they're not that person that they've built up on social media, it's crushing. It's crushing. So we need to do something about strengthening our youth. We know that we need to discuss foster kids that are aging out. Where do they go? What do they do?
Yeah, as someone who can survive aging out of the foster care system is an amazing person. I know a couple of them.
Right.
But that's a tough road.
And it shouldn't be. I mean, how hard is it to come up with a program? We've made the determination that children could be under their parents' insurance till they're 26. So why don't we have a system that supports foster kids until they're 26, if they need it? Some of them might not. Maybe they'll need it for a couple of years and that's it. But we should have a system in place.
Well, sometimes it's
Instead of
just as simple of a system where you got a mentor to call. How do I set up the utilities
a
at a new
case manager,
apartment? Yeah.
a case manager. Yes, that's most of what we need is accountable case managers who actually have a responsibility to stay in touch with an individual who's trying to get off drugs, who's trying to restart their life after a mistake and they ended up in jail. Maybe they made their parents haven't been around for them like they should have been. And so they need some help when they're in their middle school or high school ages. I tell you, I go out to some of the middle schools and I don't know how those teachers do it. There's no way that I could put up with the attitudes that those kids have. And it's because of a breakdown. You know, we don't have the extended family that we used to have. People are spread out all over the nation. And, you know, one of the biggest reasons I'm doing what I'm doing is because I have grandchildren. I have grandchildren, and someday I hope they have grandchildren. What kind of a world are they going to live in? Where are we going to be when my grandchildren's grandchildren are growing up?
Mhm.
And shouldn't those grandchildren have grandchildren? Are
Mhm.
we even going to still be around? We've got to come together and make some changes. So what else do we need? What else is Citizens for a Safe Spokane working on? We've been talking in depth about Measure 1. We need a new jail. We've got to replace Geiger. It is a disease-ridden, infrastructure failing facility that we don't own. And, you know, FAA wants it back. We've got to replace that facility.
Right.
And yet, the way it was brought forward by the county commissioners, there was no planning. There was no reach out. It's a countywide program where 60% of the money can be used by the county and 40% goes to the municipalities, depending on their population. Did they do any reach out to the municipalities to say, you know, this is all on one ballot? The people might actually want it if they know how all the money is going to be spent. How do you see spending your 40%? They just brought it forward. They brought it forward when one of the commissioners was out of town and couldn't even comment on it. And Mary probably would have gone with it. It wouldn't have mattered if she didn't, because it would have been 2-1, but there would have at least been some discussion. Now, since we've got 5, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I went to the commissioners' public meeting the other day where people were speaking, and I really did go with an open mind about Measure 1 because I really wasn't sure. What I realized though from listening is that the state has set it up so that the only way the counties can have any money to deal with any of these issues, including mental health, including behavioral health care, as well as any part of the criminal justice system, is if is to pass this special designated sales tax. And the county can't, when the county does that, it's got to be countywide, and part of it has to go to the cities. I mean, the state set up the system.
Yes.
And so
that's
without
the
the
rules
funding,
of the game.
That's the rules of the game. And it really does leave it to the legislative bodies, and the county commissioners are an interesting, because they're both the executive and a legislative branch in one.
Yes.
As our city councils. So it leaves it to that level of legislative executive leadership to decide what to do with this funding stream once they have it. But I know, you know, like you said, the jail has some things about it that are unsafe. It's not designed the way that you would design it if you were going to take care of the populations they're taking care of now.
Right.
And it needs work.
Right. Yep. Well, and it's not just that. It's the booking facility is, I mean, what they call it, red lighted. That means that the booking facility is full. So if an officer is out and has made an arrest, he can't even take the individual he's arresting to the booking facility.
Right.
So he's stuck. He either releases the person, and sometimes that has to happen, or he's stuck with that individual in the back of his car until the red light goes off.
And not available for other calls or other duty in the
Exactly.
meantime. Yeah.
And we're already short-staffed.
Right.
So that has to be addressed. What happens after booking, the Sally Port, where the individual is taken in and evaluated, and there's determinations made whether, yes, this individual, we're going to probably end up with him in a cell, or, okay, this was an oops. It was a serious oops. Maybe what he needs is some, and I'm saying he, it could easily be she. Maybe this individual just simply needs some programming and released on their own recognizance. That is substantially under positioned. They don't have the facilities there and the resources there for those, even those determinations to be made. That would all be part of the new corrections, community corrections center. So that's kind of replacing Geiger and being this triage, if you will, where individuals are released or not. A huge percentage of the people that we have in jail are waiting for trial. We need our 13th court, maybe a 14th court. We need to get that backlog down. It's been a backlog since COVID started. So we're 3 years behind now. 3 years. And we're wasting money. It's expensive to have people in jail. It costs a lot of money. And we're having to release people that maybe we shouldn't. So that needs to be addressed. There's your 60%. The 40% goes to the municipalities. The urban areas, the municipalities, is where we have most of the problem with homelessness and drug addiction. So if that 40% was through an interlocal agreement agreed upon that this municipality would provide this service, this service, this service. So the city of Spokane would provide peer navigators, detox, coordination right into in-housing programs for rehabilitation. Maybe the Valley could do a different part of it. Cheney, all these municipalities could have their own little specialties. And all the municipalities should have mental health facilities so individuals could go on a regular basis to a local location and get mental behavioral health help. Again, the schools have the program designed. Our schools in this area have programs already designed for this. All they need is someone to say, we're willing to help you fund that. It could start in a year if we had leadership going for it.
Yeah, it takes the leadership to make that happen. It also takes the money available to make that happen. I would like to say one thing about rural communities, and I don't live in Spokane County. I'm just over the county line, but I'm familiar with how homelessness looks different in rural communities.
Sure.
But there are still needs here. I can
Absolutely.
tell you that every sheriff's department and every EMS responder in the counties around Spokane or in the small communities can tell you what addresses need some help and what kind of help they need. So it is very localized, and but it appears differently than it does in an urban area.
Sure. But that could be addressed as well and should be.
It could.
Absolutely.
And hopefully the county commissioners and the city councils in the little towns would be able to use that money wisely. And again, that goes back to choosing leadership wisely.
And that comes down to my real point. The politicians work for you and me.
Hmm.
We're their employers. And a lot of people maybe have not been in an employer situation, but the worst thing an employer can do is allow an employee to get away with not doing their job, because it impacts the entire organization. You can say, oh, well, they're a really nice person, and you know, at one point they gave us something, but now they're failing. That needs to be addressed. And it doesn't always need to be addressed by terminating the employment, but it should be addressed. Most of my friends spend, and they're going to love me for this, most of my friends spend more time figuring out who they're going to put in their football pool or who's going to be on their fantasy team than they ever even consider spending trying to decide who they're going to vote for. A lot of them call me up and say, JJ, who do I vote for in this? It's like, man, it's not my job. This is your job. It's your responsibilities. It is us. You know, the
Well,
preamble.
it can,
Go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead. Oh, I just was going to say that that's a credit to them that they have given it enough thought and taken it seriously enough that they've sought out someone that they respect for who does research. So that's good on their part.
I suppose, but they're depending on my opinion, and they don't all agree with my opinion. So, I mean, that's the beauty of who we are as an organism. We all have a different vision.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're not all sharing that vision, the organism loses.
Mm-hmm.
I believe. So, a pen. It's made out of materials that you can go nowhere in the world and find this laying on its own, pre-made. This is not natural. None of it is natural. Not one single molecule. Well, the molecules are natural, but not the way they're put together in their cellular organization. And yet, everybody knows that if I let go of this pen, it's going to fall toward the center of the earth. Everybody knows that. We've seen it a million times. There is an attraction between this man-made entity and the core of our earth, called gravity, that pulls this, even though it's so different. You and I are 99% identical.
Mm-hmm.
There is an attraction. We are an organism that is made to come together.
Mm-hmm.
That is how we got out of the caves. That is how we built our civilizations. That is why we're still here. Because we come together. That is when we are strongest. That is when we can do the most things. When we're divided, and I really believe the reason there is so much angst, the division physically hurts us. It creates stress within us that we are not designed to survive. The way our brain functions is that if we come together and set a goal and achieve that goal, our brain releases chemicals that makes us stronger. It brings us peace. If we don't find ways to come together, we're toast. And my grandchildren's grandchildren will not have the life they deserve.
Well, what you just described is why I made a commitment to work with the Brave Angels organization.
Yes.
Through this next campaign season, because it's not about trying to convince everybody to think the same way. It's about recognizing that we are each individuals with a unique background and life experience that informs how we've come to our beliefs and our positions and our attitudes on policies. And those are all different, and that's fine. We just need to remember how to have good debates about it, how to
Right.
discuss it without being, how to be able to say things to people's face instead of behind their back, how to be able to have those face-to-face discussions and make connection. And it does start with connection. And
Yes.
once you have made, if you have connections with people, it is so much easier than to say, okay, well, yeah, we really disagree with this over here, but we're both going to root for the Cougars on Saturday.
There we go. And that
So
brings us,
yeah, or even for, a Cougar and a Husky to get together
there you
a week
go.
after the Apple Cup for dinner.
Well, I got to tell you, one of the other things, a subdivision of Citizens for a Safe Spokane is the faith-based committee of Spokane. This is a group of multi-religious individuals. And I'm not talking about a bunch of Christian churches. I'm talking about Buddhists, Sikhs, talking about multi-faith organization where they have agreed to set aside their minute differences, because their differences are minute. Set aside those differences, come together. In Spokane County, there was almost 1,200 faith-based support groups for addiction recovery and homelessness in Spokane County. Quite obviously, they're not being all that successful because we still have such a problem. And it's because they are duplicating services. They're not coordinating. They're fighting for the same grant money rather than becoming a little bit more specific, finding what the skills that the individuals they have in their organization are really great at and focusing on that. And so what this group is going to do, and we're having a meeting with the civic leaders on October 24th, the luncheon, to roll this group out and show, look, this is what we can do if we simply put our differences aside and start working together. And if the churches can do it, if the religions can do it, why can't the politicians do it?
Well, that will be one of the things that will be discussed. I will be one of the people on a panel at Lieutenant Governor Denny Heck's Civic Health Project Summit, which is Thursday, October 19th.
Okay.
In Renton. And so that's something that how Lieutenant Denny Heck described the role of Lieutenant Governor is kind of like being the first lady. There's not really a job description, but you're supposed to do something. It's not quite right. He has to chair the Senate and keep order and do that.
Sure.
But he's taken on as his pet project, his public project is to work on those questions of civic health that people need to recognize. We need better civics education, better ways to talk to each other. One of the reasons that he left Congress, he could have run and been reelected probably easily, because we tend to reelect because of the way our election systems tend to work. But the acrimony was just, it was no longer feeling productive. And it just was a hard slog to keep trying to find that way to come together on doing something, and which we see all the time.
Yeah.
Coming out of Congress, coming out of the state legislature.
Right. Well, and it still comes down to the voting public educating themselves. I mean, you can get so much just from reading the voters pamphlet. You can see who's funding who, and you can tell a lot from where the money comes from on who this individual is going to hold allegiance to, or which groups think that this individual is going to benefit them.
Well, and you can look in the PDC. Well, I'm going to go ahead and post this onto my forthright. I always like to post resources, and that's one. I'll put that one up there where you can check the PDC for who's supporting who. if Citizens for a Safe Spokane, I'll look up if there's a place I can find you.
There's
And
a Facebook page.
I'll find your Facebook page and get a link to that up there, and
Okay, that'd be great.
let people know. Is there's one last word of wisdom or call for action that you'd like to make?
Well, so, and this again is going to make a lot of my friends not very happy. So I do not live in the city of Spokane. I live in unincorporated Spokane County.
Mhm.
But when I look at the mayoral race, I don't see leadership. For years, I have not been able to vote in the presidential primary because I'm an independent. Because for years, I didn't see leadership. I voted for Ralph Nader, I don't know how many times. And it was not that I really liked Ralph Nader, but at least he had ideas to fix things, which of course went nowhere. But still, if I lived in the city of Spokane, I would be writing in NOTA, NOTA. None of the above. I really don't think it matters a whole lot who ends up getting elected. I think the city council has much more power. I really hope the city council takes some of that power and stops worrying about police chiefs that are maybe talking to one person more than they're talking to someone else, or whether or not a police precinct was put in a area where it sounds like the neighborhood all wants it, but they just weren't consulted. Those kind of things, that's not leadership. Leadership is not spending more time to take care of dogs and cats than homeless Americans. Leadership is not avoiding our veterans who have paid the ultimate price in one way or another to protect us. Leadership is not bad-mouthing police simply because demographics aren't the same percentages that they think they should be. When socioeconomic reasons are more likely to be a reason for incarceration than skin color. But then again, we need to be bringing in the voices for the marginalized, voices for those at risk, the voices of those who are not often listened to. They should have a seat at the table, every table, so that we stop making determinations at the 30,000 foot level. And we start making determinations, realizing the 30,000 foot level and how everything fits together. But also from the 10,000 foot level, where mid-level management is making organizational decisions that are important to understand. And from the boots on the ground, those people who are actually out there implementing the processes that our government votes for, implements. That was the word I was looking for. We need a government that works, not a government that points fingers and blames the other side. If an individual is not capable of coordinating with someone they don't agree 100% with, they should not be sitting at the dais. They should be at home watching a football game and worrying about their fantasy league. That's my opinion.
Okay. Well, voters will still have to, you can put in none of the above, but somebody's still going to win. So
that's right.
You'd best dig in and decide who you think is going to be the best of the available choices.
I'm just giving you my opinion.
That's all right. I just was letting you have a place to give your opinion. So JJ, I appreciate you giving everybody some things to think about. And it's been nice talking with you.
Thank you, Saloni. I appreciate the opportunity.